Good evening, and thanks for joining tonight's TI Technology webinar hosted by Texas Instruments, where tonight we're going to take a look at part one of 3 webinar series, which is going to focus on writing grants for classroom innovations. My name is Mike Houston, and I'm the moderator for this event. I teach algebra and calculus near Pittsburgh, where I use TI Technology to make tough-to-teach, tough-to-learn concepts accessible to all my students. I'm really excited to introduce our 2 panelists for tonight, Jen Caesar and Doris Teague. Jen is a grant partnership consultant for Texas Instruments. Before coming to TI, she taught middle grades math and science for Carlton Farmers Branch ISD. Jen also taught science, health, and special ed for Grants Cibola County Schools. Jen was the curriculum development manager for the U.S. Space and Rocket Center, where she and her team created the content used in the Space, Camp, and Aviation Challenge programs, as well as unique learning experiences at the Space and Rocket Center Museum. Jen, that sounds really exciting. Thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me. I do apologize in advance to everybody. I have a cold, so Doris is going to take the lead tonight and do the majority of the talking.
Thanks, Jen. We hope you feel better. And Doris has experience in the development and implementation of Gear Up programs in Texas, past experience as a teacher, supervisor, project coordinator, grant writer, and trainer. She is currently consulting with 5 Gear Up partnerships and serves as a grants outreach consultant with Texas Instruments. Experience at local, state, and national venues, including the National Center for Community and Educational Partnerships, gives Doris a broad knowledge of education initiatives and practices. Doris, thanks so much for being with us tonight.
Hello, good to be here.
We're expecting a large crowd, so your audio is muted. Feel free at any time to send questions to Doris or Jen using the Q&A window on the right side of your screen. We'll also be using the chat window to send general messages. As a reminder, this session is being recorded, and we'll provide a link to the event certificate of attendance at the conclusion of the webinar. Also, we noticed that there's a chance that some of the slides that you're going to see tonight might look like they're zoomed in and you're only seeing part of the slide. If you notice in your viewing window, in the upper right-hand corner, there's some magnifying glasses. There's a plus sign and a minus sign. So feel free, if you feel like you're not seeing the entire slide, to just click on the minus sign magnifying glass to change your zoom perspective. We hope you don't have any audio issues tonight, but in the event that you do, try selecting Communicate from the WebEx menu and choose Join. If that's not helping things, find your name in the participant window. In the bottom right-hand corner, there'll be an icon that looks like a phone. By clicking that phone icon, you'll automatically get information to call in using a phone, which should resolve any audio issues. At this point, Doris is going to discuss our agenda.
Thank you. Thank you. Good to be here, and I'm excited to be able to talk to you all tonight about just kind of a general overview of some grant writing information. And as Michael said, it's part of a 3-part series. So tonight's the very first one, and we're going to talk about really some different grant types that are out there, different types of grants. Some funding sources, possible funding sources and search engines, some of the components that you'll run into if you write a proposal for a grant, and elements of what winning proposals look like and sound like. That's a big agenda, and I hope we'll get to all of that. I'm sure we'll get to it as much as possible, and then also I want to let you know that Jen and I are also available, and on your PowerPoint, we've given you all of our contact information so you can contact us later if there's other things you want to ask about. So we've loaded all of our information, our PowerPoint, and our funding sources in a Dropbox location. You'll see that here, and then it's also in your PowerPoint. And if you want more information about TI products or professional development, we've given you the link for that. And I think Michael has some information about the T-Cube International Conference that's coming up.
Absolutely. Doris, we're excited. That tonight you'll have the chance to win registration for to the 2018 T-Cubed International Conference, which is coming to San Antonio March 2nd through the 4th. So it's coming up quickly. And Doris, as you mentioned, I think you and Jen are going to be doing a really special session at the T-Cubed International Conference. So we'll talk a little more about that later, but we are excited to have that coming. Doris, would you mind talking through some of the outcomes for tonight?
Right. One of the things that that brings us together for this is that we know in a lot of times school districts will write large grants, but we found that a lot of teachers are interested in some smaller initiatives or some grants to do maybe some things that their school district doesn't have the money for or hasn't written a grant for. So we want you to be able to understand different types of grants and know where you can possibly search out some sources and look for those opportunities. Then we want you to look to be able to know what the different parts of a proposal are. We're not going to be able to write one. We hope at T-Cube to be able to flesh one out and get something going, because we have a whole day of a workshop there. And then just to know some of the key elements that can help you maybe win those proposals. We don't win all the grants we write. We learn from every one that we write, but we keep writing them in hopes that we will win the majority in the future.
Doris, thanks so much. I've given you control. Feel free to switch over to your presentation.
Okay. So I'm gonna switch to the PowerPoint, and as you can see, we've taken the idea of empowering classroom teachers or central office or department chairs or any of you who are interested in writing some additional grants. And we are coming to you through Texas Instruments. A lot of what we found out there when we worked with teachers was that they are interested in the technology, but often there's not enough money. So we wanted to be sure that we were looking for some funding opportunities for you and for those things. And while we're focused a lot on technology and math and science, some of the grants that you'll run into will be for other things that you might be interested in doing at your school as well. So I don't want to screen out any topics that you might be interested in. So this is our information. I'm Doris Teague. I'm located in a couple of locations, but for the most part, I work in the general area around Dallas, and then also have a location, a home in Central Texas. So I'm not very far from that San Antonio area where you all will be coming to T-Cube. We've given you, Jen is also in the Dallas area, and it's based in Richardson at Texas Instruments, and she's given you her phone number and her email address so you can contact her. This slide gives you the Dropbox where all of our materials are located. So we hope you'll visit that when you have a chance, and email us back or call if you have any questions or issues or ideas even that you want to talk about. So we've kind of taken on the approach of a stellar trip through this grant writing, and so slide number 3 has some of the points that we're going to hit as we go through this. We're going to be, giving you an overview and talking about us as crew members and you as crew members, and looking at different types of grants. And the real payload in a grant comes in this narrative that you write, explaining and telling your story of why a grant or why you have a need for the resources, outlining a really good work plan of how you would manage or how you would use additional sources and even equipment or personnel, and then a good solid budget that supports being able to do the things that you've listed in your narrative in your work plan. And then any supporting material. A lot of times grants will ask for that. They'll ask for, testimonials from either community members, or they'll ask for some additional support materials. They'll even ask you about other grants you may have managed. So, so we want you to know that we can also talk to those issues as well. And then clear skies means the elements of a writing a winning proposal. We want you to have the very best proposal that is possible to have, and we would love it if you won grants every time you wrote them, but you'll see that it says try, try, try again, because we write grants, we think we've done everything it's possible to do, and yet sometimes we don't get that grant. But I want you to remember to keep trying, because sometimes grants are not funded the first round and they decide, oh, we have more money, and they will drop down and fund the ones that are next on the list. So don't ever give up. You could actually still be one of those grant recipients. This is just a little bit of an idea of who's out there. Doing these webinars is a lot like talking to my 13-year-old grandson. I'm talking, and I know he's there, but there's not much response. And so that is really sort of what it's like when you do a webinar. But I'm assuming some of you are out there that are new, positively new to grant writing, and so you're probably thinking, oh my gosh, where do I get started? And we'll be happy to help you in that pursuit. And then some of you are probably out there and have some experience at writing grants. You've been on a grant writing team, and maybe you're looking at this particular grant writing webinar thinking, oh, I could maybe, pass this information along to other people on at the school or on the team who don't have so much experience. And then maybe you're the brains behind some of the ideas of a grant, and you wonder, like, okay, and how can we get this on paper and get this funded? And you probably have some really good ideas that need funding. So we know all of you are out there. It's absolutely, there's no requirements, pre-requirements for this. But if there are things in here that help you and help others, we're just hoping that we hit that target for you. So I'm going to start with this, because this is really a helpful piece of information. When you're looking for grants out there, those of you who are experienced know this, and those of you who are new will find this out to be true. There are several types of grants. Nothing is just one type out there, as you know. There are grants that are competitive grants that you will obviously write a grant proposal, send it in, and you will compete with other people who obviously are writing for the same grant money. They may not be writing the same model, and they may not be writing the same information, but it's competitive. For example, I work a lot in those Gear Up programs, and those are competitive grants. People write grants. They write them for X number of dollars for a certain number of students. They list all the activities they're going to do in the pre-college outreach and success areas, and they compete against each other for that money. Again, as I said earlier, just because you don't win an award doesn't mean you should give up. You should stay in the game and write one the next time that grant proposal comes out. And sometimes I've known in Gear Up where that people have written these competitive grants. They've funded, say, the top, I don't know, I'm going to say 10% of the proposals, and then they found, oh, we have a few more dollars that have come our way, and they've dropped down and funded a few more proposals. So don't ever, don't ever count yourself out. There are, for example, Gear Up is one example, and there are other examples too from the grants.gov that are all federal grants. And usually for federal grants, those are grants that are very large amounts of money usually, and they usually would be written for a school district or a school district and a combination of a university and some partnerships, or it could be several school districts, or it could be several campuses in a school district. So the federal grants are really large. They usually require a pretty large committee to work on those, and they're pretty complex to write, and they would be really hard for a novice to write. I'm not saying the ideas wouldn't be great from a novice, but they would be really hard to write because they're so technical. And they usually have a really large evaluation piece that goes with them. And then there are formula grants that are out there. Those of you who have Title I or some of those kinds of grants, those are formula grants, and they're usually from a state department or an education center, and they are based on applying, sending in your information, and you would be awarded X number of dollars per student based on a formula that's already been established. There are state grants. Those usually go to state departments. In Texas, they usually go to service centers or the Texas Education Department. In your state, they probably go to your state department, and they then flow the money through from the state department to school districts, and they will send out an RFP that a school district will apply for those state funds. The private is an interesting area that you also will see when we start looking at sources of grants. There are several foundations that, in fact, lots of foundations that give private money for just certain very specific kinds of education programs. They require less of the technical piece that the formula grants and the federal grants require, but they also are they're very specific, and like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Carnegie Foundation, those are all very specific, and when you read their grant proposals, they will tell you specifically what they will and won't fund. So there's also, it's good that there's less technical information required, but it's also sometimes hard to hit that target. But I strongly would urge you to look for also some of those foundation kinds of grants. So we're going to move on. And you're probably thinking, okay, so where are all of these grants? Well, we have listed a few locations. There are many, many locations. If you are interested in getting on our, send Jen your information, and she can add you to our list of people that we notify from time to time when grants come along that we think might be of interest to those of you in classrooms. But for the most part, I'm going to walk you through a few of these search engines so you can get an idea. Those of you who are brand new to writing grants, this is a great way to get started and get out there and find out what's available. And for those of you who are experienced, you probably are even on some of these search engines for grants, but I'm going to take a minute here, take a breath, and change to sharing my screen up here. And so if you have any questions, this would be a really good time for you to think about asking those. Okay, so what I did was, this is very similar to the screen that you just saw, and this is just a sample of many of the funding opportunities that are out there, and there are so many more, but we've given you some that people have had some really good response from, and I want you to have them. Jen and I have used these several times in groups we've worked with, and they're easy and they're very complete. So the first one that's really, really good for those of you out there in the classroom or wanting to do some innovative projects is called getedfunding.com. And I'm just going to click on it and show you what it looks like. You can see that it's a pretty easy site to manage. You have to join the site. There's no money that's required, but you do have to just log on and join it in order to access the grants here. So I'm just going to log into my account, and they tell me I've already signed in because I tried this out earlier. And so what you can see is that you can get on to there, if you want to, on their 3 different email subscriptions to customize the updates that you get. You can, and it depends on how much you want to crowd up your inbox as to which of these you decide to do. So you can get like bi-weekly emails where you can choose grade levels and focus areas and your particular state, and they'll send you any new grants that get added. You can do specialized alerts in, math, science, technology, social emotional learning, service learning, even some for field trips, some for cultural events. You just tell them what it is you're interested in funding. And then you can also get on their blog posts that'll keep you caught up on blogs and people that are writing grants or seeking grants, or we have a lot of people that when we do this that help each other find grants. If they've gotten one, they help someone else and say, oh, you should go to Target. They fund field trips. Or we have a food bank program at our school that's great for service learning. So you go, once you join, once you get into, you sign up and you get an account, then you get to go in and you go to, you can go to a custom search site that I've done right here. And it gives, you can tell whether you want it to be a national search or you want it to be your state. You can tell whether you want it to be for public schools, private, charter, or you can check all of them if you want to. Don't do that, though, unless you're really interested, because you'll get a ton of grants that you'll think, well, I can't do this. And then for grade levels, you can check the grade levels that apply to you. I usually look for those. I'm really interested in a lot of things that have to do with middle and high school, so I usually check those. And I get tons of ideas that come across my inbox. And then you can check all of those focus areas that you want to check. Career and college readiness. You can see, you can come over here and do technology or technology education. You can do literacy, media literacy. We worked with a bunch of librarians not long ago who were really interested in that. And so they're turning their libraries into media centers and into work areas, and they immediately were looking for those kinds of things. And then You can check the content areas, maybe math or science is something you want. They offer, there's lots of grants out there for the arts. So if you know someone who's interested in that, there's a lot of them as well. And then you can look at the 21st century themes. And I'm always looking for the information literacy, for innovation, for those kinds of things to do in classrooms. But you can see there's a wide range of topics. And that's just from this one search engine called getedfunding.com. So you could really probably get lots and lots of response from that one. Another one that I would really invite you to look at would be, this is an example of one that came through the National Science Teachers Association and Shell Oil Company. They offer teaching awards. Doesn't look like my link is going to open on this one, but they offer awards for distinguished educators, and it's worth it to have that grant available to people who work really, really hard and distinguish themselves in the field of science. And so I showed you this one for the sake of the fact that, like, it can be an organization, an association, and a business that pair up to give these grants. This is a grant that's coming available next year. I strongly urge you to look at this one. It's called an iTest grant. That's short for Innovative Technology Experiences for Students and Teachers. It is a STEM learning research lab idea. And you can read the description here, and I know those of you who are interested in a lot of technology in your schools, this has to do with science, technology, engineering, mathematics. It has to do with preparing students to be the expanding workforce and changing workplace with new innovations. I mean, who doesn't want to look for things like that, right, for their kids? Increase student awareness of STEM occupations, motivate students to pursue those occupations. So this one would probably be a high interest for several of you. And the proposal deadline is next year in August. And so you're probably thinking, oh my gosh, that's so long, so far away. And it is, but it would be really great to start thinking about the kinds of things you want to do, some of the partners you want to include, the cost of what it would take to fund something you're interested in. You can always find out more about this. Almost all of these sites are going to have contact information too that you can call or you can email them with questions about before you even start writing.
Doris?
Yes.
I just wanted to add from the questions, somebody was asking about sample proposals or examples of proposals that have been won. Most of the sites that Doris is showing you, if you go to the actual link for the funding opportunity, they will usually have previous awards, and they will have a proposal there that fits their format, and you'll be able to see what they have funded in the past. And those are good things to look up when you're thinking about applying to a particular funder.
Oh, I'm so glad they asked that question, because everybody wants to see. I do that. I immediately go there and find out, what have they funded in the past? And sometimes I think, wow, they funded that. I should have written that. That was a great idea. But they will tell you what they funded, if the proposal. They won't probably tell you the ins and outs of every bit of it, but it will give you some great ideas to go on. So good for you. That's a good question. Grants.gov is going to give you all of the grant opportunities from the federal government. You can search the grants. You can put in the topics and the areas. Look at this. There's so many. It's just like overwhelming. But I'm only showing you this to show that it's going to give you the date that it posted, the date that it closes, and you can click on it and it'll give you more information about it, of course, and the proposal. So, you know, this is a really good site too to know what's coming up. And then GrantsWatch is another really good engine for search engine for looking for a variety of grants that are out there, and they're going to be you apply based on whether you're a nonprofit, and you in schools are nonprofits, businesses, individuals. Actually, I found one the other day for one of my neighbors who raises these companion dogs and goes into schools and works with kids, and so it was really neat to find that for her. Okay, so we're back to the search engines and talking about what's out there. So these are some of the questions and some of the issues that we run into when people write grants, and the questions they've asked us and we've tried to answer. And if you have specific questions that you want to write to us about, we absolutely would love to do our best to answer those. But one of the things about grants that's so important is you have to, if you're a classroom teacher, even it doesn't matter actually if you're an employee of a school district, you need to find out in advance if you're interested in writing a grant. You need to go and get permission, obviously, from your principal, from the school district, from the chain of command about how well this particular project that you're interested in will fit into the mission of the school. We don't want any of you to spend a lot of time writing a grant only to find out that someone will say, that's not something we're going to be able to do here. So I'm just going to say that right off the bat. And the second question is what we will spend the majority of the second webinar talking about. So what need does your proposal address? And we have a lot of teachers and a lot of educators who come to our workshops, and they'll say, well, we just need the technology at our school. Our school just doesn't have it, and they can't afford it, and we just need it. And we agree. We nod our head, and we agree that they do, and we wish that money was more readily available. But likely, just needing it won't be enough. You'll have to look for grants that will allow the technology, just like any tool, to do what the outcome is that you're proposing. Like if you feel like, okay, our students really are, they're really struggling to grasp the concepts in Algebra 1, or it seems like I'm not making a connection with them, and I really feel like, the technology would help that work. Well, then look for things that have to do with that need of the need for algebra, because you're probably not going to find many grants out there that just say, how would you like to buy a classroom set of, handhelds. You'll have to show a way that those handhelds will help you address the need for students. And so when you think about it that way, then it becomes a little easier for your searches to look through all those search engines and look for grants. I know that sounds simplistic, but that's really the way it is. Sometimes you can find a grant and you can think, gosh, this is a really great grant, and it would allow us to get the technology we need and use it in this particular grant to satisfy what the grant is asking us to do. So help yourself in terms of getting these grants by looking at really identifying the real needs out there that need to be addressed. And then you need to know, and these are all questions to ask in advance, like how many students and teachers are we trying to affect with this grant? You know, is it going to be a small grant? Is it going to be one classroom? Is it going to be a math department? Is it going to be just students who are struggling with math, or is it every student? You know, so it's really important to think about that when you think about a proposal. And then what documentation do we have that need exists? Well, most of us can point to, you know, grades that our students are making, or to standardized tests, or to the state assessments, or we can also, I mean, we have a lot of information too about, you know, students' attitudes and behaviors too, and that actually is another piece of documentation that you can use. And then what documentation do you have to support the solution? You know, how are you going to gather information that says, you know, once we tried these innovations, they worked, and we can support this as a solution that works, or we can use the information that we've gathered and we can make changes in the program until, you know, until we do get the solution right. So that's some of the why of why we look for grants and why it's important. The next piece of this, and if any of you have any questions, I'm not seeing the questions come in, so if you have any, don't let me talk over your good questions that you have. But I do want to go on and finish this so you have enough information to go on. This is the next piece is the who, the what, the when, the where, the how. How do you plan to address whatever needs it is at your school or in your location? You probably have a good plan in mind. Or if you have talked to someone who has a plan, you know, maybe it's to offer more tutoring to students, or maybe it's to offer a Saturday study classes, or maybe it's to offer, you know, pre SAT study sessions, whatever it is. How would you address that? Kind of brainstorming for your ideas. What are your objectives for what you plan as an outcome? What are the staffing needs? This is a really crucial piece. If you write a grant and you don't put in enough people to work in the grant, to manage the grant, to make the grant successful, you probably won't get funded, because it's counterintuitive to what we think. We think, oh, I hate to ask for more people. I hate to ask for more tutors. They'll probably think we don't need them. But, you know, the point is, if you need them, put them in there, because that shows you genuinely want that grant to work, and that you genuinely want those needs of the students to be fulfilled. Don't think about it as, oh, I'm just afraid to ask. Think about what would the ideal situation be like? How many people would we need? Where would they be housed? Who would manage this? Because you may write a grant, but if you're a busy teacher, you probably can't manage a grant. So are you going to have to add personnel for that? You know, what is the pay scale? All of those are important things to think about. The next question, do you have buy-in from staff and partners? Do you have, you know, is the staff on board? Say you're writing it for a math department. Does the math department have some buy-in and some interest in this? If you're going to ask partners, either local community partners, or you're going to ask university partners, or you're going to ask even business partners, you know, contact them, find out what their level of interest is. Would they write a testimonial, or would they support a grant that you were going to write? And then this is the one where we really, really cannot stress this enough. How are you going to evaluate the results? You know, are you going, and who is going to do it? And when will it be done? And what will be your instruments? Will it be surveys, or will it be test results, or will it be a research model that a university may come in and access the data for? How are you going to evaluate the results? So you also have to build in some costs for evaluation sometimes. If you have an outside group to come in and evaluate, it may cost money. So those are things to think about as well. If you're writing a pretty small grant, you know, for just classroom initiatives, you can usually do some things like test scores, you can do some surveys, you can do some anecdotal and behavioral concepts that have changed. You can do some pre-test and post-test. But if you're writing something that's pretty large, you probably have to add a pretty extensive evaluation component. And then the last piece on this slide, boy, I'm just really talking a lot, so bear with me here. What are the costs?
You're doing great, Doris.
What are the costs in proportion to your goals? What is it that it is, you know, have you put enough money into your proposal to actually reach the goals that you have set? And if you're in a competitive grant, you're probably thinking, oh, I don't want to ask for too much because they might not fund too much. But you know what? They also won't fund too little either, because they'll know there is really no way that you can have a program on a shoestring budget like this, and they'll think this is not a serious proposal. So be sure that you think about the costs, and costs in terms of what would specialized, individual, comprehensive help look like. And then how a lot of grants nowadays have this next piece added to them. They have a sustainability feature. How after the grant, and that means after the grant monies go away, or after they disappear and you're no longer funded, say from a federal grant or something else, how will you sustain it? And that piece is really important to put into a grant proposal, because they want to know that if you've done all of this professional development for teachers, teachers know how to use, you know, the handhelds, the navigator systems, they know about the innovator. How will this be sustained after the grant is over? If people are trained, you can always say, you know, we've done extensive training, now they're on their own, they're actually training the new teachers themselves to come in. Our district's made a commitment to continue to add to the equipment that already exists here. Whatever it is, they want to know how you can sustain it. Would you be for example, could you be a demonstration site for other people who were interested in those same innovations? So the sustainability is a big piece of a lot of grants nowadays, and I think it's because funders want to know that their money went beyond just initial funding and lasted longer in a school district. And then, are you going to, and this is really important, the next one, are you going to provide in-kind or match contributions? Sometimes a grant will give you, you know, $1 million for an innovation, but you also have to come up with either half of it or 100% of it from some in-kind services, and that could be like that could be mentors that you bring in from the community. It could be if teachers do study sessions in the afternoon that's beyond their contract time, you can count that as in-kind or match. There are various ways to do that, but I just want to say in advance, be sure you know that before you go into a grant that has the in-kind or the matching contributions. TI is a great partner. I want to give them a little advertisement. They are a great partner for helping you find, match, and they will bend over backward to be sure that you have that for your grant. And Jen would be your person to talk to about that. She does it. She manages the match piece of a lot of grants. And,
Doris, we have
yeah.
a question.
Okay.
Somebody wants, Robert would like to know if he writes multiple grants and gets one funded, do the other grants need to be stopped?
No. And I said that emphatically, although it depends on what the other grants are. But you know what? Chances are your objectives for those different grants, Robert, will all still. You could do the different grants and still meet your objectives if all of them are funded. So if you want to email Jen and I and talk about what possibilities you're thinking about there, then we could answer that question better. But no, I would write. I know a district right now in Texas that has 7 grants, and they're large federal grants that are very similar, and they're managing all 7, and they're doing, and they have a need for all 7. So, no, you do not have to stop one. Just all I can say is, Robert, could we sign you up to write some? Who is going to track the spending? You have to find out from your business office or your financial department who is going to track the spending for the grant, and who will be sure that the line items that you've put in there and the areas where you said you were going to spend money, that you're keeping track of that, because that's something that most grants will ask for. They will ask for about every few months. They'll ask for an accounting of that money. And then, have you thought of all the pieces that the grant is asking for? Go back and check to see that everything the grant proposal is asking for is something you've included. All right? So this is my favorite slide. It's so great. It's in a galaxy far, far away. Okay, now really seriously, the first part of any proposal is the narrative. And this is something that, we will spend a little time on next time we're together, because it also supports the need for grants. But the narrative is your story that tells who the students are that you have in mind when you write this. It tells about the community. It tells about the details of what's happened in that community. It's a mental picture for the reader to think, I can see where they would really, really need this intervention. In Texas, there will be lots of grants that will be written, and they will begin with the devastation of, the hurricanes here, because there are entire school districts that are, where the students have had to be sent to neighboring school districts because the schools are destroyed. So, they will paint a picture of that. Many of you live in communities where the economics of the school district have had a downturn, where the community is in peril, and possibly losing schools because they need resources so badly. So you really need to be able to paint that picture for a reader. Give a little bit of background about the need and about your organization and things you've done in the past. And Robert, this is for you out there. You can also include in your narrative that you have received other grants and that you've managed them very well. It's okay to say, we've been successful with other grants that we've received. That way, a funder knows this is a reliable group who wants to do a good job, who uses the money wisely, who is really going to to meet those objectives because they've done it in the past and they have a good reputation for that. And then provide a little bit of information about how a grant would impact the students that you serve. So this is the part that, it takes a little while, but it generally hooks the reader into setting the stage for who you are and why that need exists for funding. And then the work plan. I'm gonna stop in just a few minutes here with this, but the work plan is the nuts and bolts. It's a management plan. It tells who's going to be involved in the grant, how you're going to evaluate it, what your benchmarks and goals and milestones along the way are going to be, and then also what each person who's involved in the grant will be doing, so that the reader and the funder know, okay, they've thought this through. They really know how this thing is going to be structured, and we can clearly depend on them to manage this in a responsible way. The budget is something that I generally start with when I write a grant. I think if we got this amount of money, what would we do with it and how would we use it? And from there, then, I'm able to more clearly work out a work plan, and also I know my narrative because I know in advance who it is I'm writing that for. But this is a really great way to start. Think about those categories and what it is you would like to do and what it would cost to do it, and then it becomes so much easier to write out a management or a work plan. We will spend our third session together working on budget information and doing that. So I'm gonna go through that pretty quickly. And then support materials. If a grant enables you to do this, then by all means include test scores, demographics, teacher and student observations. You can even include the education degrees that the teachers have that are going to work in the grant. Any research that you can find that supports best practices that you're including in your grant, include that in there. The What Works Clearinghouse has tons. I would strongly urge you to use that to support your innovations because it's already been vetted and researched, and it's sound and it's good. And you want to include that in yours if possible. And then here are our elements of success. I love this particular slide. Jen did it, and I think it's so great. You've defined your needs. You keep kids in mind at front and center of what you plan to do. You have a collaborative idea with other teachers, business partners, maybe university people. You think of a name your grant, so maybe even some graphic that people can remember. It's positive, logical, clear pathway. You build a mental picture of what you're trying to do, some way that your grant gives back to the greater community and is sustainable and very consistent. It's detailed, it follows the guidelines, and honestly, it matches what the funder has in mind to fund. This is, we could underline that 3 times there because that really is a very crucial piece. And this is the last send-off. Never give up. Try again. Dust off those proposals. Run them up the flagpole again. Do a little tweaking. Try again. I know I'm talking to really busy people, but I cannot impress on you how one grant won't be funded one time and the next time it will. So, yep. Jen,
Doris, can I add? Can I add to that last slide? In that try again, be sure to ask, if you don't get awarded, ask the funder for the comments made on your proposal. Those comments will help you to improve your proposal based on the reader's perspective, because it'll identify areas that were weak. It's always good to get that information. And the other thing is that in doing so, you can also ask, I know you're not funding this, do you know of another funder that might? And so that opens the opportunity for them to make a referral, because the grant community is actually pretty small.
It is. And you know what? That is great advice. Absolutely. Use those comments, make the changes, try it again. So this is our January session will focus on statement of need, how to identify that, how to define it, how to write it. The February session will be centered on a sound budget, what you can and can't fund, how to do those categories and line items. And then we have the one-day grant writing session at T-Cube, and we hope that will interest you too. So I'm going to toss it back now to Michael, and I think he's going to tie this up with you. And I want to thank every one of you for spending your evening, this 1 hour together. And I hope you found some things here that'll inspire you to get started and look around for some funding that fund the things you know you want to do.
Doris, thanks so much. I feel like things went pretty fast tonight.
Really?
Yeah. So this is a good segue from Doris, your last slide. So you guys are going to be presenting a one-day session on just grant writing. So if you appreciated the short 60 minutes that we had here, please feel free to look for in a couple weeks. We'll have information about our January and our February Part 2 and Part 3 sessions, which again you can register for free, and then leading up to joining us at the T-Cubed International Conference. So imagine having all 3 parts under your belt and then coming to the conference and speaking with Jen and Doris. I think would be a great way to really kind of cap off your experience in writing grants. So we hope you'll join us at the T-Cubed International Conference, again, coming up this March in San Antonio. Earlier we mentioned that one lucky winner tonight is going to receive a complimentary registration for 2 to the conference. And tonight's lucky winner is Malene DeFerris. So Malene, congratulations. We really hope to see you as well as everyone else at the conference. To receive a certificate of attendance, go ahead and click that link in the chat window. Also listed is a link for the documents that were used tonight. I know many of you were asking about those documents. If for some reason those links aren't working for you tonight, have no fear, you'll automatically get a follow-up email, and in that follow-up email will be a link to the recording, as well as a link to the certificate, and a link to the documents as well. And if you're watching this on demand, go ahead and copy that link down to your favorite browser to receive your certificate. Thanks so much, Doris and Jen, for everything you shared tonight. Jen, I hope you feel better soon. Doris, thanks so much for kind of taking the lead tonight and spending so much time talking through some really important topics. Again, thanks everyone. We hope to see you back online real soon. Have a great night.